to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome on back. Wednesday, August 13th. It's the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'll be your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz, and that's it.
I mean, what the heck, man? The season is days away. I was going to say weeks, which I guess technically is accurate, but I'll go with days because it makes it sound like it's that much closer.
Yeah.
And we're here for you guys. Kyle's here. I'm here. You know, Jason, Mike, not here. So,
Crickets.
Foot Clan, you know who to trust. You know who loves you. I'm just saying.
We are in crunch time, and it is the week of footballers that is the most stressful when it comes to putting a show together. I will throw that out there. We have tips and tricks this week, and then we have My Guys that comes out on Friday.
Ooh, big show.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, a lot of the behind-the-scenes process of picking a My Guy, which, 11th year, no big deal. 11 years picking out My Guys, is I think they're just so stressed out for the people. So there's a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff, extra shows we're doing this week. I know that the footballers are going out of town this weekend, so we have a lot of stuff going on. But I'm kind of grateful that I don't have to give 3 My Guy picks, much less do people take every single word that I say and say this is, gospel, it's gold. People just kind of hear me talk and facilitate here, and they move on, and I'm okay with that.
I was going to say, you have the easy job. You get to just kind of like keep the show moving, keep us on track, and, you get to like throw in a take here or there, but when people are listening, they're not listening to like, okay, here's Kyle's take. He's keeping this thing on the tracks, and then me and Jason and Mike look silly in hindsight, and that's how you drew it up.
My job, I feel like, is to set up this company for success, but really to tear people down when it comes to any statistical argument. Anything somebody throws out, I'm ready to just bring in a left hook and tell people, yeah, but do you know that doesn't really matter. So when someone says like, oh, he can handle the workload, we joked about this recently, Betz. How could you flip that argument?
You could also say that he had too many carries in college, too much wear, on the body. He's not going to last in the NFL very long. You can basically say whatever you want and spin it.
You could say like, oh, this quarterback's like really good outside the pocket. And then you could flip it back. Why is he going outside the pocket so much? What's that saying about his offensive line? Does he not trust the people around him? We can really flip any argument we want based on my priors. And that's kind of where we're at in preseason. Today on this show, we're going to give some preseason takeaways, talk about some usage, and more importantly, some dynasty takeaways moving forward. It is hard to glean something and say, based on 11 routes and 2 targets, here's what now I can say about this player's dynasty value moving forward, or their week 1 usage. We'll bring up some names, but Kenny Pickett looked really good in preseason a couple of years ago.
Yes, he did.
But Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett. Maybe I should just shut up.
Eagles legend Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. What was the game? Was it the Week 18 game that he came in?
He came in when Hurts left early. I think it was like the week prior, the Washington game. Okay. But no, it was Tanner McKee, who is now quarterback 2 on the depth chart, who came in and looked actually pretty good in that Week 18 game, which it's Week 18, but I think a lot of people that are in the Eagles organization are pretty high on him as a backup type of quarterback.
We will also get to talk about some dynasty startup questions here. All of our rankings you can find in the Ultimate Draft Kit, ultimatedraftkit.com. I'm looking right now at our dynasty startup rankings where we have a consensus between Andy, Mike, and Jason. And one of the things that's really easy for me to do is to sort by age. And so when I'm looking at quarterbacks specifically in a Superflex league, I'm trying to find the right trade partner for one of the teams that I have. I'm using the draft analyzer. So I'm looking at another team who has 3 quarterbacks. It's kind of a luxury for them. So for them, they can look at their team and go, ooh, I have some trade capital. For me, I can use that as leverage. Say, oh, you have too many quarterbacks. The price just went down. But I'm using the rankings to see, I'm sorting that way. I'm also sorting by age. Did you know who the youngest starting quarterback in the NFL will be in week 1?
Oh, that's a good question. I I mean, obviously there's some rookies, or there's a rookie, Cam Ward, but he played 5 years in college.
Yeah, Immaculate Word and
so
Washington State, and
it's
then
not
Miami.
Cam Ward.
I'll give
Obviously,
you a hint.
it's not Bo Nix. Hold on, let me think. I'm gonna go with Drake May.
The youngest starting quarterback in Week 1. We can project this guy's Week 1 starter. Will be J.J. McCarthy.
Okay, you know what? I've taken a lot of him recently. Like, I've been trying to trade for him in Dynasty, and I'm a huge fan of Kevin O'Connell and the scheme and all that stuff, the weapons in best ball. But because of me thinking to last year, he's kind of out of sight, out of mind as far as who was in the NFL. Now, is he considered a rookie this year as far as if like in your data set and stuff when we're doing research for like rookie quarterback performance? I mean, technically he's not a rookie, but he's never taken a real NFL snap outside of preseason. Does he count as a rookie?
I have him in both sets. So like Jordan Love, we know, didn't get the snaps. Mahomes only had Week 18 as a rookie. Penix didn't start until the very end of the season. So there is a set of rookie quarterbacks, air quotes, who, you know, didn't start till the end of the season. And what does that say about them moving forward? And you know, their value of being a Week 1 starter. I've brought this statistic up many times, but every single year, almost a third of the league turns over their Week 1 starting quarterback. So the Vikings are kind of a glitch where it was Darnold last year, should have been McCarthy, and now it's McCarthy this year. But yeah, it's still part of that same process of 10 or 11 quarterbacks every single year turning over. Jackson Dart will be the youngest when eventually he starts, but it'll be Russell Wilson in Week 1. But it's interesting to sort that way. You can do that with all of our rankings, ultimatedraftkit.com. Speaking of rankings, I had a quick question. I had probably 5 or 6 people in the last week either email in, DM, or I still see it all the time in our Discord channel. And they asked, what are your biggest changes in startup rankings since you guys last did a startup mock on the podcast? So I went back and saw that me, you, and Jason did a mock June 4th. Who could forget that beautiful, beautiful episode? And to no surprise, you can go back and watch that episode if you want. Betz, you went 0 RB. You had a bunch of fun wide receivers out of the 101 spot. Jason was at the 5 spot, and I was at the 9 spot. But I think the bigger question I have of if we did another mock on the podcast, I know that people are out of their minds for mocks. I think it's more of a question of like, should news over the summer change Dynasty rankings that much? Like Devon Achane, he went in the second round of a Dynasty startup, a 1 quarterback startup. Other than Jonnu getting traded, is there anything that really changed his value over the last 3 months?
Not really. I mean, that's a huge factor in the projections. I shouldn't say it's a huge factor. It's a factor in the projections for redraft leagues. The bet on Devon Achane is still the same as kind of it was even with Jonnu there, in my opinion, is ultra explosive athlete, can catch the football, has the skill set you want in fantasy for running back. But, you know, if Jonnu leaving makes him more valuable, it's probably in the big grand scheme of things, you're probably losing sight of kind of the player evaluation for Dynasty. And I think that's true at a lot of things where there is obviously a lot of overlap in redraft and Dynasty as far as the year outlook ahead. But a lot of times we're betting on talent over everything in Dynasty. Player talent, and then as well, NFL draft capital. Kind of the two biggest things, and those obviously go hand in hand to some degree. And then the other stuff, you know, is a factor in decision making, whether it be trades or a startup or whatever it is. But oftentimes we overvalue situations and, you know, target competition and stuff like that. I think back to last year, one example with target competition, and we're all kind of worried about it, was like Brian Thomas Jr., right? It's like they got all these guys. They got Evan Ingram. They got Christian Kirk. How is this going to work? And he's just that good. And we're seeing that a little bit right now. And obviously the Godwin injury is helping this. But when Ibuka got drafted back in April, and we talked about that in May and June in rookie rankings and stuff, a lot of the conversation was like, you know, the situation doesn't seem ideal from a target share standpoint right away because Godwin is there and Mike Evans is there and Jalen McMillan was pretty decent last year. How is he going to fit? And it's like, well, if he's just that good, and it's hard not to read camp reports right now and think he's just that good, that the talent will emerge eventually, and it might happen sooner than later, especially with Chris Godwin. So yeah, I think that example of Jonnu with Achane, I think is a perfect way to kind of showcase that.
It's hard for players that we're thinking about more than just 1 year to change that much within 2 to 3 months. I mean, there's obviously injury concerns. There's the suspension names. Like, for instance, I took in that mock Quinshon Judkins at the 404. Apparently, I'm a really, really bad judge of character, so I apologize. But obviously that changes from when we did that in June to now. Travion Henderson actually went 2 picks before him. So I look at players like that, or Egbuka, who you took at the 501. I think based on the sentiment, which is really how a lot of people are drafting, right? It's just vibes based at this point. Preseason is a vibe, it's a feeling, and it's okay. But some of those players are going to skyrocket if you were going to do a Dynasty Startup mock. The suspension names would probably get a momentary, decrease in value. The Judkins, the Rashee Rice, where he went in the draft, Jordan Addison. I think all of those would drop a little bit. It is interesting. I'm looking at where Travis Hunter and Tedero McMillan went. They both went in the 3rd round of this draft. And I think that's just going to be an ongoing debate the rest of this year of which one would you prefer. I'm in a league, in a Ballers Dynasty League, where we took McMillan over Hunter. This was back in May. Okay. Then we get the news over the summer, like, okay, he's going to be, like, he's getting all the offensive snaps. Then about a month ago, hey, he's going to be playing a lot of defense now. And now people have seen him a little bit. Does it really change anything about your evaluation of Travis Hunter versus McMillan? Because in May, I took McMillan over Hunter. Right now, I would still take McMillan over Hunter.
I think for me, I would take Hunter over McMillan. Not that I don't like T-Mac. I think T-Mac's a really, really fun player, great prospect. I think he's a really good fit in this offense as well, and he should have no issue seeing a ton of targets as the alpha there. But for me, the hesitation back in April and May was the cornerback stuff with Travis Hunter, and that's not going to go away. But I think when you're looking at this from a probability standpoint, and that's kind of what you just have to do in fantasy football, obviously you can't predict the season. You're just making bets based off of information you have and how likely you think that stuff is to happen. I mean, Liam Cohen is an offensive guy. They don't really have real legit weapons behind Brian Thomas Jr. I know people are kind of excited about what does a Brenton Strange breakout look like, or De'Ami Brown. Prior to last year, De'Ami Brown was basically going to be out of the league, right? He had done nothing through the first 3 years in the league and then kind of had a nice little stretch there. They don't really have weapons besides him. And if you think this offense is going to come in with the offensive-minded head coach and just be like, well, we'll play conservative and we're not going to try to put up points. No, they're going to put up points. And the way they do that is through Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. And don't get me wrong, if there's an injury in the secondary and they need him to play more corner in a week or two that they, had planned for, that will happen. So it might be kind of a frustrating kind of back and forth situation, but I think the most likely outcome is Hunter plays way more on offense than he does on defense. That's my take on the situation. And so that's the bet I would make. And I think he's a more explosive, dynamic, just different player than McMillan. They're different in what they do as far as their strengths as players. But when I'm, playing fantasy football in Dynasty, you really need these true unicorn difference makers to actually win your Dynasty League. And if you can hit on that guy in Hunter, he could be just something we've never seen. He's that good at wide receiver. Whereas T-Mac, I feel much better about his chances of hitting and staying on your roster for the next several years. But I think Hunter has a much, much higher ceiling.
Yeah, it's tough where T-Mac fits in on this team. He's like our wide receiver 5 right now. So it's almost like
That's nice.
Yeah, so we wanted to hit a double, or what we felt like was a double. Who sees a higher target share in year 1?
I mean, one guy is competing with Brian Thomas Jr., who's very good, potentially a superstar. And T-Mac is competing with, Adam Thielen and JT Sanders and
Leggett if he wants to play or not fight.
Hunter Renfrow, the boys. So obviously I think Tedero McMillan could push for a 30% share.
I've been looking at the Panthers more as a shootout. I mean, last year they gave up the most points of all time on defense.
It was bad.
Second most yards allowed. I mean, a lot of it was on the ground, but if you get that's the mix for fantasy, right? If you have this back and forth affair and your defense can't, then I want a wide receiver that's also going to see, I think he's going to see 25% target share, which for a rookie is really, really, really good. That's really solid when you look over the last decade of first-round wide receivers. But overall, startup ranks, sentiment changes things. And if you were to have a little journal and write down how you felt about a certain player and then come back a couple months later, like Ladd McConkey, the vibes were he went the 207 in this startup. Well, the vibes over the last 2 weeks or a week ago was this guy's not practicing. Oh no, they signed Keenan. This could be really, really bad. I'm just trying to point out the ebbs and flows, and yet our evaluation of McConkey should not be based on Keenan Allen. I love Keenan Allen. Obviously, he's my favorite player in the league, but my dynasty outlook on McConkey doesn't really change. It hasn't changed at all.
Now, same team. What's your vibe right now on Trey Harris?
Okay, so I wrote him down that I was hoping that we get to him later on in the show. Also, next week, we have a rookie fever show. So we're going to be going through a lot of the rookies and kind of assessing them, but it's not great. It's not great. I think there are some tiebreakers that people took in the second round of the rookie drafts when it was Burden or Harris or Jaden Higgins. And so if I'm giving hindsight analysis now, it does not feel as good for the year one outlook for Trey Harris. I did have concerns that every single metric that we stated when we did our wide receiver evaluations, his 5.15 yards per route run we knew was not going to hold up. And Ole Miss players in general, I have question marks about how they translate to the NFL. It's just not a great look when Huge is holding his own. Lambert Smith is clearly a thing. I won't say he's a starter or anything, but he is a thing.
He's making the team.
And then Keenan's going to play more outside than people realize.
And this is all for a team that I think there's some debate, and it's good debate in the fantasy kind of community of trying to forecast the Chargers, because we talked about it a lot, right? The splits in the early part of the season versus later part of the year, they were way more pass heavy than you realize. But how much of that was the run game struggling, a little bit there last year versus if they actually wanted to do that and put all this on Justin Herbert's plate? I don't know. I mean, drafting a first-round running back in Amari Hampton, who is a true bell cow, and obviously we know the Najee situation is a complete kind of chaos situation currently, but before the fireworks incident, you sign Najee, you draft a first-round running back, it's well, maybe they're telling us they do want to be pretty run-heavy. So it's tough, man. If it is, let's just say they're balanced, right? They're 15th in pass attempts this year. If you start giving snaps to Keenan and Ladd and QJ, and Keandre Lambert-Smith starts to emerge as a role, and Trey Harris hopefully mixes in for some snaps here and there. I don't know how to divide these targets, man, because Ladd and Keenan, I think, are really going to dominate those. For all the decline as far as where Keenan is in his career, he still earned a target last year on over 21% of his routes. That's solid numbers. It's not Keenan's peak numbers, obviously, but that's very solid. And we know Ladd's a target earner, so it's just where is the year one opportunity for Trey Harris? I'm struggling to see that right now, and I feel if they truly thought highly of him, so highly that they could count on him based off what they've seen for the first part of the offseason, maybe Keenan wouldn't have signed there. I don't know. We don't want to overreact too much to the situation like we just talked about, but for a guy who wasn't the cleanest prospect in the world, it does kind of give you some pause.
I'm looking at a Superflex startup mock that I did around the same time with our writing staff and some of our Discord members. And by the way, if you really want to get in on the conversation of certain players' valuation in a Superflex draft or any dynasty format, our Discord, there are drafts happening all the time. There's also leagues forming all the time, footleagues.com in our Discord. So if you just I need another league, this is the place to do it with people that are connected in the same way. So footclanleagues.com. But I looked at that startup mock, and a lot of the rookies, Burden, Higgins, Matthew Golden, Trey Harris, Jack Besh, they went in the 8th and 9th rounds in a Superflex startup. And I wrote this down because I did an article on this startup, and I said a year from now, we could probably be talking about at least 3 of these guys showing up in the first 5 rounds of a startup draft. I'm looking a couple months later, and you can just see in general how rookie wide receivers, when they're in an ambiguous situation, we're well, Golden's a first-round wide receiver, I didn't love his profile, and also, I don't know how to sort out this mess. Same thing with Higgins and Burden, and yet I think if we did a startup mock today, we know Matthew Golden would go higher, and we know Jaden Higgins would go higher.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah. I think it's okay to admit that certain parts of the summer, it changes the valuation of young players, but on established players that we know who they are, I mentioned Ladd McConkey, like they're going to go around the same spot. Nothing's going to change that much, but make sure you check out all of our rankings, ultimatedraftkit.com. Let's take a quick break and then talk preseason. We have a treasure trove of drops, thanks to Mike Wright, but I think this is the one that is most associated with Mike and himself. And, what's great is that Mike just came up with this on the fly. This has zero influence from any movies that have ever happened. It's his own thing. So let's go.
Preseason Power-Up.
Oh man, that's a good one. Don't know where he got that riff from, but it's pretty great. I don't know if you saw, Betz. I have had a little bit of a argument with my sons about some 90s movies.
Oh, an argument.
Yeah, I put out a little rankings list of some 90s sports movies, and they don't like the movies that I like as much. They like some of them better, but Mighty Ducks is a little bit lower on the list.
And your thoughts on that
It was next to Air Bud.
Okay. Well, listen, fellas, you got to talk to the boys, put them in their place. I mean, this is where you drop the classic dad line, like, I'm not mad, just disappointed. And they know what that means.
I'm really disappointed because there are certain 90s movies that hold up. The humor holds up. And then when you take a deeper look, which I know that only a few of us do, but there are some really good statistics you can mine out from some of these movies, especially Mighty Ducks. Apparently they don't appreciate that. Air Bud, woof. The gameplay is terrible. Just terrible. Anyway. Preseason, I want to talk about that. But before we do, we need to make sure we don't overreact to small sample sizes and 10 snaps for a player?
If that.
So we liked Emeka Egbuka. Okay. We talked about him a lot as a prospect. I'm sure if you listen to multiple podcasts, he's definitely one of the names of the last month that has risen the most. He had 10 snaps. He ran 4 routes and he was targeted twice in preseason week 1. You can't really glean that much. Okay. Or else it confirms what you already think. But we do have some actionable information we need to talk about and adjust a few players in their dynasty ranks. So we'll talk about that. I mentioned the Kenny Pickett showing from a couple years ago. But let us not forget last year. We talked about this on this show. But Caleb Williams had a throw off platform to Rome Odunze that people went wild with in preseason last year. I mean, it solidified. This is the Caleb we like. This is the Rome we like. And I'm going to give us some stats, but that play is a perfect example of why preseason highlights are just not, they're 30th on the list.
Yeah, and the play, if you forget, is rolls to the left, defenders coming on to Caleb. He obviously is throwing, an awkward angle away from his body down the left sideline, drops it in the bucket. Rome Odunze, man-to-man coverage, comes down with the ball. And I think that play alone sent both players' redraft ADP up about a round and a half when that happened. And to their credit, it was an awesome play. But like you said, some of this stuff, I want to be careful kind of how I word it, because there are takeaways you can get from preseason. But it's trying to be really mindful about not getting stuck in the weeds and thinking everything you see is actionable. Because I would say there's 90% of it that's not actionable. There's probably a little bit in there, maybe 10% or so, that's actionable. And that's the tricky part with this time of year, is that it's so easy just to see everything, whether it's on Twitter or you're watching all the games or whatever, and just think all of this matters. The vast majority of this will not matter. And trying to figure out what does and doesn't, we're going to try to help. But that's a key part of August in the fantasy football calendar.
In general, we as people, when we get new information, it kind of ends up, it reinforces what we already think a lot of the time. It confirms our bias. So we get new information or a new highlight, we get to say, ooh, I told you so about this player. Nothing like taking a preseason victory lap. That is definitely what you need. So just to give you some numbers, Caleb Williams last year outside the pocket during the regular season, his catch rate on his ball, so the percentage of balls that were catchable was 51.8%. The only quarterbacks that he was better than is Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, and Gardner Minshew. Okay. That was outside the pocket. It wasn't good. And the other outside the pocket one that just jumped into my brain was that Zach Wilson off-platform throw that he did at his pro day, I think.
I think it was combine. The pro day.
Okay, it was BYU pro day. You remember when he launched it. It was a beautiful throw. Okay,
great throw.
I remember researching this and I found the statistic, but he only completed one more play action pass of 45 air yards the rest of his career. So after that play at his pro day, he only did that one other time. And the point is that the plays that we really like are often not repeatable. And that play that Caleb Williams did was awesome preseason. That's just not going to show up a ton. So let's talk about a couple of headlines here. You wrote an article called News or Noise with our editor, Julia Papworth, on our site where you took some takeaways from the first preseason. And the first one you wrote down is that, and we're going to just hit as many of these as we can on this episode, that Roschon Johnson is headed for a specialized role in the Bears offense. I did see that he hasn't been talked about a lot by Ben Johnson this year. And I think we all assumed after the draft, like, oh, Swift's their guy. Ooh, Roschon, now that's a sneaky name you could be taking. But it seems like Roschon is like goal line or nothing.
I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, what we're doing in this article, just to kind of give more context, is like taking some of the biggest news blurbs that are moving. I guess we're using like redraft ADP, moving kind of markets and player evaluations, and giving our take on if this matters or doesn't. So this, I'm not saying that I believe Roschon is headed for a specialized role, but that's what the headline was.
Yes.
And so now we're adding context. And basically for me, the context is like right before he picked up an injury last week. I think it's a foot injury. Right before that, in practice, he was getting a ton of goal line reps, and he was also getting a lot of pass usage, which led to this headline being given. And obviously all offseason we've been saying, okay, well, Ben Johnson had DeAndre Swift in Detroit a couple years ago. We saw Jamal Williams have that insane touchdown year. So naturally, us as fantasy players are saying, well, how is this going to work? And who is the Jamal Williams in this backfield? Oh, it must be Roschon. And if that was your prior, and then you saw the usage in practice with him at the goal line, you're like, okay, we have it. The tricky thing is now he's banged up. Kyle Monangai is a 7th round pick who, I don't know if he has like a ton of fans in the fantasy space, but every time this year there's buzz on a certain guy, he's getting a little bit of buzz. And they also met with Jamal Williams, which is kind of ironic given that he's the role we're trying to fill with Roschon. So I think at this point, like once players show you who they are, you should believe them after 4, 5, 6 years. We know what DeAndre Swift is, right? Like he's very explosive. He's very good in the pass game. He's dynamic. He's not the best runner at the goal line. So I do still think this matters. Like I think there is a back that could come in and take those goal line touches from DeAndre Swift and be a guy that in either standard or half PPR is valuable for us. The tricky thing is I don't think as of this show, August 13th, I don't think we know who that back is yet. I also still think that there's like this small like part of me that's like, is there a veteran that gets cut that they end up signing a week before the season? And you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Because this staff is not really tied to any of these guys outside of the front office signing, DeAndre Swift a couple of years ago. So that's my take on it. I'm not overreacting one way or the other to anything as far as Roschon or Monangai or anybody else.
No, I think that's a really good point. And when you were mentioning it, I was like, I don't think the lead running back for this team in 2026 is probably not on the roster right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think you don't have to get too attached to Swift, his contract, Roschon, and what could be his role beyond this year. Obviously, the offensive line has changed a ton, and we like that. I'm not making moves on this backfield. Like I'm not preemptively saying I'm going to trade for Swift or I'm going to try to get Roschon on the cheap or Monangai is going to be the dude. I think I'm just waiting for a veteran signing, or I think a year from now they're going to draft somebody that's going to be Ben Johnson's dude.
Yep, I agree.
All right, another headline that you have is Cam Scatterbo has optimistic MRI results and Tyrone Tracy is firmly the RB1. He did see 5 touches, Tracy, in their preseason opener, and then they subbed in Devin Singletary, or as I've been calling him, Devin Dingleberry, because he's barely hanging on to the roster.
That is so mean, but so perfect in so many ways. Oh, poor Devin. And if you remember last year, let's just rewind the clock 12 months. All the conversation in the Giants' backfield was like, they signed Devin Singletary.
He was pretty good. Him.
It was pretty good in Houston the year before. He is Brian Daboll's guy. They trust him. He's going to get workload. And granted, he did pick up a groin injury, like off the top of my head, roughly 2 months into the season, and then Tracy really took the job and ran away with it. And he's clearly more explosive, obviously, at this point in his career relative to Singletary. But right now, the talk out of Giants camp is like, this is definitely Tracy's backfield. And I want to be careful with how people interpret that, because if you only saw the headline, this is from ESPN's Jordan Raanan. He was on a fantasy show and he kind of just gave like a quick take on the Giants depth chart. If you didn't listen to the whole thing, this sounds like, oh, Tracy, to the moon. He's going to be great. He was basically saying, like, entering the start of the season, Tracy is clearly RB1 on the depth chart. It's only more obvious because Cam Skattebo isn't even practicing right now because of a hamstring injury. So, yes, Tyrone Tracy will get more touches than Cam Skattebo in week 1. Is that sentence true in week 10, week 12, week 16, 17, when we're thinking about a fantasy championship? I don't know. I would say it's kind of up in the air. But I wouldn't inflate Tracy's value right now. I also wouldn't depress Cam Skattebo's value right now just based off of this headline. That's where I'm at. And the thing that I keep coming back to with Tracy, that it's such a weird dynamic, is like, obviously a former wide receiver in college, can catch the football, but everything they talk about with Skattebo is his pass catching work. And if you recall, our prospect shows, like, his numbers as a pass catcher were really, really strong, even on a per route basis, not just raw data. So I'm having a tough time kind of seeing how that split goes. And then you look at maybe, okay, if the Giants are better than we think, and there are more goal line opportunities that we care about, and they actually can score touchdowns this year, like Skattebo's got what, 10, 12 pounds or something on Tracy. Like, I think he could earn that goal line role too. So if somebody else in my league is like super hyped on Tracy because of this report, I am definitely putting him on the trade block and trying to see what I can get in a dynasty trade.
Yeah, if you're a contender, and let's say Tracy is like your RB2, RB3, like, I don't think you have to take this news and trade him away for beans. But if I'm somebody who's in the middle of the pack or I'm rebuilding, I'm trying to capitalize on this news because in general, we look at teams that are bad. They usually don't have a ton of fantasy points. And with his draft capital and with the fact that it could be a completely new regime next year, let's just be honest. Like, Daboll is on the short list of guys that could be fired with the hardest strength of schedule in the league. So Tracy is a player that, depending on where you're at, you don't have to trade him, but now would be the time to trade him with this news and Skattebo just kind of slowly returning. The next headline is James Cook related, and that he's still not practicing. He's doing his thing, Jimbo, trying to figure out what he wants to do. And after the Kyren extension, I think he's kind of one of those players that's next in line. So how are you taking the fact that he's not practicing?
Well, breaking news. As of our recording, recording this the day prior, he is apparently set to practice today, per Sean McDermott. So
breaking news, guy might show up to work.
So when you're listening to this, you'll know if he practiced or not. But when we did this article, he was still not practicing. And then we had kind of the weird like weekend report of like, the direct quote was something about him not being willing to play in the preseason game, but he like dressed up and warmed up, and that was like an agreement before the game started. So this doesn't change anything for me. Like, I think James Cook plays this year. I don't think the Bills are going to shell out top 5, top 6 running back money for him because the dude played 48% of the snaps last year. Like, I get that James Cook was very good last year, and to his credit, we're always rooting for players to get paid. So like, I hope James Cook gets money, but him trying to get the same type of contract as like the top 5 or 6 true bell cows in the league, I just don't see it happening. And, I think this is one of those dynasty situations that will end up being very risk reward. If he can play this entire year without injury and have another solid season, I think he'll get paid next year, maybe by some other team. But I don't think the Bills plan to give him a really big contract. Maybe they add some incentives or something, or give him a short-term deal or something, and that changes our conversation. But as things stand, I don't see the Bills budging on this, and I don't see James Cook budging either. I think both sides have a fair argument, which makes it really tough.
It's wild. I mean, the touchdowns is the main story about this past year, and regression. 16 rushing touchdowns. You can't repeat that. just look at pure usage, which is what we usually do for running backs. He had fewer opportunities per game, fewer snaps, fewer yards than the year before. It's telling to me that when you look in the backfield and you think of Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, who is annoyingly good at what he does for the team, and then their goal line back, Josh Allen, it's just not as valuable role when it comes to usage. He is the best running back on the team, and yet it's okay if the team doesn't pay him because they win and they're good at it. He also had like the weird thing where he'd have the Saquon runs, like he had 4 touchdowns of 40 plus yards, and then he'd have these dud games where looking at his game log, it's like at Baltimore, woof, at Los Angeles in week 14, the team lost 42-44, and yet he was not good. He was a dud. So I think James Cook, if you have him in a league, do you feel like there is, he's at the lowest that he's going to get now? Like, there is room for an extension. We need to at least put that on the table, that it's possible that he gets a 3-year deal. That's really just 2. Is this like the lowest, and so you don't want to cash out on 60 cents on the dollar?
Man, he's so tough because I really love him as far as like how he scores fantasy points and his efficiency and all that sort of thing. But, and I have him in 2 leagues, and the valuation for him in like when I've been trying to trade or
sell low,
include him in trades, definitely that's what you want to do. You want to sell low whenever you can, buy as high as possible. Dynasty 101. It's just some people still highly covet him because he's been a top 12 running back in fantasy, and obviously those guys are super valuable. Other people know the contract and are kind of scared just like some of us are. So it's so league dependent on what I'm doing with James Cook. But as far as like, is this the lowest he'll be? I don't think so. I think the most likely outcome is that he plays this year, like I said, and he's valuable when he's on the field and he's putting up fantasy points and all those things. But there is also a non-zero chance. I don't think it's likely, but it exists, where if this lingers into, super late August, early September, he says, I will threaten to hold out regular season games. Now, he hasn't said that, so I'm not making that claim, but just it's possible. And so that would be probably the lowest point in my opinion. But no, I'm not selling currently right now based off what's going on, because I still think he plays this year and he plays in week 1. And if that's the case, just like any other running back that you might be kind of thinking about trading away, wait for a couple of good games, wait till other league mates in your league need running back help. That's when you want to capitalize, but I'm not moving him right now.
All right, a couple more headlines here. Spencer Rattler has been getting a lot of the first team reps. We saw Tyler Shough have a really good highlight moment that I saw when I first opened up my app. Like, oh, look at this touchdown from Tyler Shough. And then a little bit later, it's like, oh, look at this pick 6 from Tyler Shough. That's preseason for you. Do we care about who the quarterback is in New Orleans? Should we care?
We should not care about week 1 because that player will almost certainly not be starting in week 10.
You'd rather be not good enough to start week 1.
Exactly.
It's a weird, it's a funny situation, but I think I agree with you.
Well, it's like, yeah, of course, like maybe Rattler is playing well this year in camp, and we need to back up because like, what does that even mean, right? Like relative to Shough and Jake Haener, does that mean anything? Probably not. But if he is starting week 1 and this team is 2-7 or something in a couple months, like clearly they're going to want to see what Tyler Shough has to know if they can move forward with him as a potential guy, or if they're just scrapping this thing and starting over next year, which probably is going to happen. So I don't really care who starts week 1. I just hope we get some level of functional play for Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. But we'll see, man. We'll see.
If you have either quarterback in a Superflex league, are you trying to capitalize on either of these things? Because it was like, I'm approaching this. I'm not saying it's right. I'm approaching this situation as these guys are not the dudes after this year.
I think that's how a lot of us should approach this. If Tyler Shough emerges as the starting quarterback for the Saints next year, that would be, in my opinion, a massive like underdog outcome to happen. I think pretty unlikely.
You gonna doubt this guy after all of his injuries and stuff? I mean, come on, Betz.
What does that say if Spencer Rattler wins the job in week 1 about this player? Yeah, I don't I don't think either of these guys are the starter next year. So if there's any window in season where it's like they've had a nice game or two, or they're starting to put together a couple weeks in a row, like I'm definitely putting that on the back burner for potential trade if quarterback injuries happen in my league.
If Rattler starts the season and you have Shough on your team, you will get a boost in value when he gets named the starter in week, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is. So that's the time to capitalize, because being a starter is different than being a player you want to start in Superflex. I know everybody has to start a quarterback in their spot. I don't know if you want to start some of these players, especially Rattler. Come on, guys. Like, he's not it. He thinks he's it, by the way. The rat tail definitely thinks he's it. Our last little headline here is that Chris Godwin might not play week 1. I think you have kind of talked about this. I mean, you have the injury tracker in the Ultimate Draft Kit. You talk about the timelines. You even have here's when they had their surgery and the recovery timeline for him. So with Godwin, when you got this news, how did you respond?
Yeah, I feel like this news has been coming kind of slowly, like we've been waiting for it. But we talked about this a lot on the DFS and betting pod with Matthew Stafford and some other injured players. It's like we still feel like football is a little bit further away. Like, we're a couple weeks away from real games happening. So if these guys aren't participating in some fashion on the field now, to expect them just to go out in week 1 and play normal snaps and be 100% is fool's gold. Like, it's going to take time for these guys to not only just get back on the field, but then ramp up, several weeks into the season. So I think right now, I'm approaching Chris Godwin as if he's more likely to miss multiple regular season games than play week 1. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but just based off the trend and based off of the Bucs personnel and team, they can kind of afford to not force him out there in week 1, right? They've got Mike Evans. They've got Igbuka, who's obviously headed for the Hall of Fame. They've got Jalen McMillan, who's a serviceable wide receiver 3. They've got your boy Cade Otton, superstar. They don't need him in week 1 the way that they might need him in week 8 or week 9, obviously. So, yeah, I think Godwin, in my opinion, is more likely to sit in week 1 and potentially week 2. I think there's also a chance he starts on the PUP list, which would mean 4 games. But yeah, this kind of drumbeat has slowly been building on Godwin, and I'm starting to believe it is the most likely outcome.
Tampa Bay's opening schedule, week 1, at Atlanta. They travel to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Dude, that place is going to be rocking.
Did you see Hendon Hooker in the preseason? Guy was absolutely rattled. He tried to walk into Mercedes-Benz Stadium and come out with a W. Kyle knows that does not happen in the NFL.
Betz and I joke about this a lot because I'm a Falcons fan. It's not an advantage, people. It's really as fun as it is to go to the games. Like I'm like, gosh. But by the way, don't forget the Bucs lost both games against Falcons last year. People forget.
They're rattled.
No, their open schedule's at Atlanta, at Houston, where they are underdogs, against the Jets, and against Philly. So other than Atlanta, those are 3 tough defenses to start the season off. But I think they can afford to wait on Godwin and kind of see where things head after that first month of the season. Let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about some more news or noise. All right, so I'm going to quickly rattle off some player usage in week 1 of the preseason, and kind of just say it, and then you tell me if you care or if it changes anything about dynasty evaluation. We said at the top of the show, 5 snaps from a player should not ruin their career, but Betz has made a living this summer of basically telling people like, hey, their career's over. It's a great ongoing bit where Betz on social media will jokingly say, when they signed J.K. Dobbins, you're like, well, R.J. Harvey's career's over. I guess he's retired. And people are like, oh, man, I totally agree with you.
It's so funny, man. Half the comments are like, they get the joke and they are laughing. And the other half are like, dude, you're an idiot. Like, he's obviously going to emerge later in the year. You don't know football. It's like, guys, clearly joking. The most recent one was great when he got listed as the RB5 on the depth chart. I was like, oh, dear. I mean, this is bad news. Like, he's probably going to be playing in the USFL soon. And I don't know if it's like Broncos fans that are mad or what, but guys, come on, it's not that serious, okay? He's obviously still going to be good and have a role. And the guy played with almost all the snaps with the starters this past week. So let's keep things in perspective.
Yeah, just queue up another one. Just put insert player is completely undraftable, their career's over, and then just schedule it and see, or just wait and you could throw out any player. So Broncos Twitter hates you right now.
I'm going to wait for the Niners to sign another running back because all of the ones not named Christian McCaffrey are injured. And as soon as it's, I don't know, are there even like notable free agents available right now? Who's out there? Like Zeke?
Oh man, poor guy.
It's on Zeke. Like Christian McCaffrey is now undraftable. It's done.
All right, let me see. Gus, the Gus bus, man.
I am shocked, by the way, that the Chargers have not signed him.
Just as like a courtesy, like a Make-A-Wish?
Just like Najee can't play right now. And as of last week was walking laps. So obviously he's not playing week 1. I don't know. Is it Vidal season again behind Hampton? I'm just surprised they didn't sign him up to take, 8 carries a game just to kind of spell Hampton here and there. But we'll see.
I bet somebody's going to sign Jay Willie, Jamal Williams. He's a fun time.
Yeah, he met with the Dolphins as well, which, man, Alexander Mattison injury is, that's a tough one. But, he met with the Dolphins and the Bears in the last several days.
That's what I'm kind of rooting for right now. Over the next, couple of weeks, I got the Keenan thing, so that's big. But, Amari Cooper, he's chilling out there, trying to get a job.
Does he even want to play?
Betz, there is a part of our culture and society that is unemployed in their late 20s and early 30s.
Gabe Davis, you're the problem. Gabe and Amari just chill on unemployment. I truly feel like Amari Cooper might not want to play football anymore. Gabe Davis, we'll see, but I'm not sure it matters.
I'm going to look up how much Amari Cooper has made in his career because I think he's done okay for himself.
He's made more than you and me, Kyle. Let's just say that.
Whoa. I just had my annual review with the footballers.
Oh, it's corporate.
And you don't know that it's possible that, no, I haven't made $136 million in my career.
Oh, man. Dude, he was so dominant coming out of college and for several years, obviously.
And also super young. Always super young, Amari Cooper. All right, let's talk about some player usage. You tell me if you care, you don't care at all. Breece Hall. He played, quote, 50% of the Jets' first team snaps, so he split them. Do we care at all about him moving forward? Jason was on this podcast saying, I know what Breece is like now. I know the sentiment, but he's going to get some type of contract to be the guy beyond this year. That could still be true, but do we care at all about him and Braylon Allen?
I care in totality. This only adds to it. Like right now, the talk out of Jets camp and everything is that this is going to be a split backfield. And if they had said all that and then all of a sudden Breece Hall is coming out and he's playing every snap and then Braylon Allen's playing with Adrian Martinez, then it's like, okay, maybe that's all, that's all smoke. But the fact that it's all lining up and it's like, we want a split backfield. And then but the first team had a split backfield. And you look at the history of kind of this coaching staff and where they come from Detroit, I kind of feel like this is where we're headed. Doesn't mean Breece Hall won't be valuable in fantasy, because when you look at the current situation, I still think in full PPR, Breece Hall is going to have a better season than people realize, because who are they throwing the football to besides Garrett Wilson? There's a real chance Tyler Johnson is starting and playing real snaps for this team. And if you've been playing Dynasty for a while, that's kind of was a buzzy guy 6 years ago. They don't have a wide receiver too currently. Mason Taylor is back in practice, but missed time with the high ankle sprain. He's a rookie. Who even knows? And yes, they're going to be one of the most run-heavy teams in football, but I don't know, man. I think this split is going to be one of those that will benefit potentially both running backs. Yes, of course, you want all the bell cows in the world, but Breece Hall, I think, is still going to catch a ton of passes, and I think people are a little overreacting to all of this scare of the split backfield and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we are gluttons in fantasy because of what Breece Hall did 2 years ago. We're like, well, he obviously has to be a top 5 back every single year. There are very few players that get the passing work that he does. Now, some of them are just gross checkdowns that are not nearly as valuable. But when you look at the roster and you mentioned Tyler Johnson, it's Josh Reynolds, who somehow just keeps staying alive, just keeps usurping depth charts. Lazard still on the team. Mason Taylor was back at practice today. So that's a fun little ad. But the thing about Braylon Allen, he came in being a man-child as this young dude who is a freak. And yet last year, this is going to be really sad, he had a the only person who logged a worse explosive rush rate than Braylon Allen was Gus Edwards last year.
Oh boy. That's not a stat you want to hear.
No. And efficiency stats like that change year to year. So I don't think that I look at that stat and go, Braylon Allen can't hit the big run based on what he did as a rookie. Our studies have found that players that teams use top 120 draft capital, so they're a top 120 pick, so that's into the 4th round, they end up seeing a usage increase the next year. The Trey Bensons of the world, those guys are the guys that didn't do a ton in year 1, and yet they're going to be a thing. So I think Braylon Allen is a valuable piece to hold on to, but I'm not abandoning Breece Hall. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And who knows, if this does become a weird 3-headed committee and they're actually like, this does happen, if Isaiah Davis is on your waiver wire in Dynasty, scoop him up. He actually had some nice stuff in his collegiate profile coming out of, I think it was South Dakota State.
He was a jackrabbit.
If I recall correctly, yes. Where Dallas Goedert went to school. If he's on your waiver wire, he's worth adding.
All right, the Jaguars backfield, Etienne played 100% of their snaps on the first drive, and then Bigsby took the next 2 drives. And then what are we doing with Baishal Tootin?
And then on Monday, there was a report of Tootin running with the ones and looking good, apparently. So, I don't know, man. I don't think any of this is like actionable.
That's my takeaway too.
Like I think, and maybe they were trying a certain personnel grouping or something, or a certain pass rate within the first team offense in preseason week 1. I think there are going to be game scripts where they're going to lean on the run more, and you'll see more Tank Bigsby. I think there'll be game scripts where they're having to throw more, and you'll see more Travis Etienne. Or I could see a situation where in November, all of a sudden, Tootin's coming on and he earns the trust of the team and he emerges as the guy. Like, I think any of that combination is on the table. So I guess if you had Etienne and before the game, the kind of sentiment was like, well, Tank Bigsby is going to run away with this job. At least this gives you some hope of like, hey, he was out there with the ones that, he will definitely have a role. I just don't know that it's, or I shouldn't say I don't know. I know that it's not 100% of the snaps in the regular season. And I think that you're going to see multiple running backs used.
All right. Speaking of running backs, nasty boy Jacory Croskey-Merritt, or as we know him, Bill, he started, and I have to use quotes for that. He started for the Washington Commanders in that backfield. So this is a chance to victory lap everything that we know and love about JCM, aka Bill. But we do need to add in the fact that B-Rob and Eckler were not playing in the game. So I think the bigger point here about Bill, JCM, is that he was getting early down work. And then they were mixing in McNichols as like a 3rd down guy. But he was ahead of Chris Rodriguez on at least in week 1. All I'm taking away from this is that he's still nasty. It's nice to see early down work this young in a career.
Yep. And I think this solidifies him as the likely RB3 entering week 1. That's kind of all I'm taking away from this.
I thought you were going to say that solidifies him as basically the nastiest. No, I my favorite nasty boys are the guys that might not make the roster. I think he's going to make the roster.
He's definitely making the team.
Which you can't say about every single 7th round draft pick, by the way.
Truth.
All right. The next one I have for you is real simple. Is it Marvin Mims season?
So you're asking this because he finally played like a real wide receiver role in a quarter, basically. 16 of 19 snaps with the starters and left the game at the same time that Bo Nix did. So it wasn't like he was out there with the 1s and the 2s or anything like that. It was only with Bo Nix, and it was like a legit every down type of role, which, through 2 years of his career, he's kind of been hovering around, 30% of the snaps, 40%. And it's just so hard to ever put that guy in your lineup. Even if we think he's talented and explosive and all those fun things, it's hard to put that guy in your lineup if that's going to be the case. So I think this at least like raises an eyebrow of like, what does this mean? I'm not saying that this is definitely going to be happening this year. But I think there's a possibility that Mims finally kind of put it all together and Sean Payton trusts him and plays way more than we realized, than we projected, I should say. At the same time, this is a coaching staff that no matter where you've kind of been with Sean Payton, like he always has a rotational kind of group behind the true number one receiver. Obviously, that's Courtland Sutton. So I still think you're going to see some, Pat Bryant and Vele will get in there for some snaps, and Troy Franklin will see some snaps and all these things. So I'm not overreacting too much, but I at least am now monitoring this more seriously than I would have otherwise.
It will be interesting to figure out how this team approaches 11 personnel, where, Sutton's locked in out wide. Vele played a lot of the slot last year, is about 70%. And then Mims has kind of been this weird piece that they don't really know where to go with him at all. Evan Ingram's going to be, but Evan Ingram kind of functions as a slot wide receiver. He doesn't really function as a tight end. So when you start piecing out a team, this is what's so frustrating about Kyle Pitts, is you go, all right, they're going to use him in line as the tight end. It's like, well, it's not really what he's good at. And he's not good enough to be a wide receiver. So then he's just this slot wide receiver spot taking up where somebody else could be. And so I'm trying to figure out with Mims, I would love for him to be outside. Like that would be ideal. He's been better in the slot, but when you add in Vele and then Pat Bryant and then our boy Troy Franklin, I still think it's going to be a bumpy ride. But it is encouraging to see if you have Marvin Mims stashed on a bench and you have a league that gives bonuses for long yardage plays or double flex, you have some life here.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I don't know what their plan is for starters in week 2 and week 3 of the preseason. We'll figure that out here in the next, week and a half. But like, if this continues for 2 weeks in a row, then like maybe this is a sign of what's to come. I also wouldn't be surprised if, next week they're like, oh, Marvin Mims played 8 snaps with the starters and that was like 50%. I think anything is on the table here.
He's good enough to warrant this, though. That's the frustrating part. Like, he's not just some random name that we found from some small college that we all kind of rooted for. Like, Marvin Mims has been the dude since high school. His high school highlights are insane, by the way, if you want to have
second
a
round
time.
Pick, NFL draft.
Yes, and he was awesome in college. He's a fun player. I don't know why teams draft him. It's an employment issue. If you bring somebody on as somebody who's employed, you want to use them in best of your ability.
Correct.
This guy has a job. Like, let him do his job.
Dude, whenever you have a chance to give little Jordan Humphrey some snaps, you just have to do it. You have to.
Dude, I was just sorting some wide receiver stuff, and LJ Humph was definitely higher up in terms of getting slot snaps for this team than I realized. He was not utilized very much. A 8% first read target share means he was running wind sprints.
Just here for the vibes.
All right, a couple more here at wide receiver. Zay Jones, who I did not think we'd be talking about, he played more offensive snaps with the first team than Michael Wilson did. So do we care at all about who the Cardinals wide receiver 2 is? Because last year was so condensed where it was Trey McBride, the lowest team wide receiver target share in the league, and then they dump it off to the running backs. Do we care about who these dudes are?
Not really, if I'm being honest. Because this is a run-first team. The identity is James Conner. And obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. we still think is very, very talented. We just need some better scheming and usage, and Trey McBride is going to dominate target share here. So whoever is out there, it's like you've earned the ability to be, the term that's kind of gotten thrown out this offseason that I kind of like is that sacrificial X. You've earned the right to be on the field. Doesn't mean you're going to see the football. So who knows who the wide receiver 2 in air quotes is. Doesn't really matter for fantasy because you're never going to be putting that guy in your starting lineup. I will say, just on context on this, Michael Wilson had missed a little bit of time with a concussion in the last week. So I don't know if he just like wasn't as part of the install for this, game plan with the ones the way he would have normally otherwise been. But to me, this is nothing.
You also have to keep in mind that in preseason, they are trying out certain personnel groupings because they're trying to get action as a team and saying, this is what we want to use. So they did 11 snaps out of 12 personnel with the starters. So you have other guys on that team blocking tight end Tip Raymond, who is huge, by the way. They took in the 3rd round last year. I think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel stuff where you're going to run the ball. You're going to have 2 tight ends on the field. You have Trey McBride, who functions as the wide receiver 1. You have Marvin Harrison outside. And then Yeah, if it's Zay Jones or Michael Wilson, I don't think it's going to be a valuable part of the offense. This team is one wide receiver short, by the way. It's one of the teams.
They need depth, you mean?
I thought Keenan would sign here.
Yeah, that would have made a lot of sense. But they already have one of the better slot wide receivers in Greg Dortch, so.
I feel like we have a bet somewhere that's like, is Greg Dortch still in the league in 2027?
We made that bet last offseason.
Is it 2027?
I think so. Or no, it was last year, this year, and then 2026. It was a 3-season bet. So I need Greg to hold on for one more year. Come on, buddy.
Those are really fun and also very sad bets. Is this guy employed? I keep bringing it back to that. That's real people and their jobs.
If you would have told me Amari Cooper, not employed, Greg Dortch, very employed, I would have been surprised.
All right, a couple more here. The Titans wide receiver room. Who led the team in snaps, Betz? Tell me, who was it?
The Packers?
No, the Titans.
Oh, the Titans. It was your boy, Van Jefferson.
The cardio king himself. If you listen to our DFS and betting podcast, he's maybe our favorite player to take an under on, because ball's not going to come his way. He's just running routes. Just take the under on Van Jefferson. The usage here is that they played the veterans a lot, Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, and then the young guys, the rookies they took in the 4th round, Ayumanor and DK, got worked in a little bit with the starters, but it wasn't really a thing. I just wonder with this team, are we going to see that same usage earlier on where it's like, okay, we'll give those young guys work later on in the season, but like we trust Van Jefferson to be where he's supposed to be on the play.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like supporting your rookie quarterback with Van Jefferson seems not ideal. But I'm not a coach, okay? And I don't really know what the thought process is. But I will say that I cut up actually the all 22 of Cam Ward's dropbacks from the first preseason game just to see like kind of how he looked and how he played. And obviously we don't want to take away a ton, but there were some throws, really nice anticipation and timing with Calvin Ridley. So I'm kind of excited about what that could potentially look like if you're a contender and need wide receiver help. I think Ridley is super interesting just because the target competition here is obviously not very intimidating. And I did want to just note that the first play, the first pass attempt, does go to Van Jefferson. And I don't want to spoil this for anybody, but it clanks right off his chest plate.
Oh, man.
To his credit, he had a defender on his back, but it's just like Cam Ward hits him. It's like a, right over the middle of the field, like 8-yard pass, right in the middle of the chest plate, bounces to the floor. So yes, Van Jefferson will be out there early on. It doesn't matter.
I think what you're underrating is he's a glue guy in the locker room.
You need those in the NFL. You need those.
You need moxie. You need poise. You need charisma. And Van Jefferson has it. He 2nd round draft capital, man.
That's surprising.
It's not a great pick by McVay.
In all seriousness, Chig played a ton, which
I love.
If
Chig.
You've been like a Chig fan just because he's so efficient on a per route basis, or at least he has been, this at least gives you some hope of like, oh, he's just been chilling on my bench. Like maybe he could emerge as the second target earner in this offense because, as we just mentioned, behind Ridley, it's non-existent. So I think Chig's a fun little sleeper for this year.
Yeah, you could do worse in a tight end premium league of having somebody else as your tight end too. That's like that's all the caveats I need to give in a contract year. So Chig's playing for the big bucks, and I love him. He'll always be one of those players I root for. That's going to do it for this episode. Next week, we will be talking all things rookies, hitting that rookie fever. So make sure you check out your Dynasty roster and bring all your rookie questions to us. And check out the Ultimate Draft Kit at ultimatedraftkit.com. We will see you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.